Why, hello again. Uncle Mike here. Would you like to read a book with me? Today is a very special 4th of July episode. Have you ever wondered how our country started in the first place? Today we have a book of a few kids who grew up to do some amazing things for our country. What kind of adventures do you think they're going to go on? Let's find out. John, Paul, George, and Ben by Lane Smith. A special message to lucky readers. John, Paul, George, and Ben is a goofy book loosely based on the history tales I remembered from school. I wanted to show that your childhood could be full of mistakes. You might chop down your dad's favorite cherry tree, for instance. But you might also grow up to be president. Lane Smith. John, Paul, George, and Ben by Lane Smith. Once there was 4 lads, John, Paul, George, and Ben. Make that 5 lads. There was also independent Tom, always off doing his own thing. You see him on the very corner. John was a bold lad. At the start of every school year, the students were asked to write their names on the chalkboard, and every year it was the same story. John, his teacher would say, "You have lovely penmanship, John. Your confidence is refreshing. But John, come on. We don't need to read it from space." His name, John Hancock. Look how big he wrote it on the board. Paul was a noisy lad. Before fun was invented, people joined bell-ringing clubs. As a member of Boston's Old North Church, Paul spent hours practicing in the Belfry Tower. Look at him go. Over time, that bell ringing took a toll on young Paul. All day his head was filled with loud bings and bongs. He had to practically scream just to hear himself talk. Now, that's fine around the belfry, but not at work. Extra large underwear? Sure, we have some. Let's see. Large, large, extra large. Here they are. Great, big, extra large underwear. Oh, look at the lady. She seems horrified. Paul was like a bullhorn in a china shop. Your wig? Yes, it's coming! And your polka dot shirts are coming! And the pink breeches are coming! Do you know who Paul is? We'll find out. It took many years and a midnight ride for people to finally appreciate his special talent. The redcoats are coming! We'll find out what that means soon. Everyone except that big underwear lady. She was still mad. George. George was an honest lad. Do you know who this George is, or he grows up to be? One day, he took his shiny new hatchet and chopped down his family's cherry tree. When his father discovered the tree, he asked, "Son, do you know who killed this beautiful little cherry tree?" "I cannot tell a lie," answered George. "'Twas I who chopped down this cherry tree." "Then run to my arms, dearest boy," cried his father, "for you have paid me for it 1,000-fold with your honesty." "Really?" said George. "In that case, when I tell you I've taken out the apple orchard, leveled the barn, and made kiddling of your carriage, you'll be a wealthy, wealthy man." I don't think that's quite what he meant. Ben. Ben was a clever lad. Who do you think this Ben grows up to be? Not only did he have a saying for every situation, he generously shared them with anyone, anywhere, at any time. Fish and visitors stink after 3 days, he said. What do you think that means? He considered it his duty to provide frequent, free advice. The sleeping fox catches no poultry. That's an odd one, isn't it? Those who in quarrels interpose must often wipe a bloody nose. Look at him. If your head is wax, don't walk in the sun. 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Ooh. The townsfolk were so taken by his generosity, they came up with a saying especially for Ben. Please shut your big yap! I like it, said Ben. Short and to the point. Work a fox or a turkey in there, and I think you've got something. Tom. Tom was an independent lad. Who do you think this Tom is? One day his teacher, Mr. Douglas, asked the class to make birdhouses by gluing macaroni to ye old balsa wood. Tom happily ignored him and used his traditional building materials in a neoclassical design. Wow, look at him go. When the class made a palm tree, Tom took one look and said, "Not on your life," then quickly left to sketch his own tree. Young Thomas, fumed Teacher Douglas, would you mind explaining to the class why you insist on working so independently? Certainly, said Tom. In fact, I've taken the liberty to list the very reasons. Fear not, sir, I've used small words for the benefit of the dullards. What do you think dullards means? Tom learned the power of his words that day. Mr. Douglas told him to pursue all the life, liberty, and happiness he wanted. Wow, that sounds kind of familiar. Independently in the corner, the other students pursued lunch. The rest is history. Say, you want a revolution? Well, George, Paul, George, Ben, and Tom sure did. In April of 1775, they got one. The Redcoats were coming. In fact, King George III's army was marching to Lexington and Concord to arrest John and other Sons of Liberty. Fortunately, Paul Revere was a noisy man. After his midnight ride, every Minuteman, woman, and child knew who was coming and what they'd be wearing. It was the start of the Revolutionary War. The Americans needed to formally state their separation from the king. Who better than Thomas Jefferson, Little Tom, an independent man, to write the Declaration of Independence? Simply signing a document was treasonous and dangerous. Ben Franklin, Little Ben, a clever man, said it best. We must all hang together, he quipped, or assuredly we shall all hang separately. One might think twice about signing his name, not John Hancock. A bold man. He was the first to scribble his autograph, and man, just look at the size of that John Hancock. The war was won thanks to General Washington. Remember Little George? Everyone thought he would make a great king for the new United States of America. But George Washington was an honest man. The last thing we need is another King George, he said. President George, however, has a nice ring to it. Kind of like Bran the Broken. Let's see. Ye old epilogue. George didn't live in the White House like all the other presidents. He was asked to live in New York City, where there aren't so many trees. That was such a great book. What did you think? Some of the stories were quite silly, weren't they? And at the end of the book, it shows which little parts were true and which ones were made up for the story. It's called Taking Liberties, wherein we set the record straight with ye old true or false section. John had the biggest signature on the Declaration of Independence. This was true. It was so big, he reportedly bragged that the king could read it without his glasses. When John was a boy, his signature was always the biggest one on the chalkboard. False. Large classroom chalkboards weren't invented until a few years later. The Sons of Liberty was a secret society. True. The Patriotic Club was formed after King George III imposed the stamp tax on American colonists in 1765. John Hancock was one of the leaders. Paul was in a bell-ringing club at the Old North Church. True. We're not sure if this caused him to talk loud, but you could try ringing bells non-stop for hours and see how you talk. The famous 2 If by Sea lanterns were lit in that same Old North Church, years later prompting Paul's midnight ride. True. On the night of April 18th, 1775, Paul shouted, "The British are coming!" False. Back then, Americans considered themselves British. That would be like saying, "We are coming." And that sounds pretty silly. Most historians agree he probably said, "The Redcoats are coming." The Revere shop sold extra large underwear. False. The Revere shop sold silver. But extra large underwear is always funnier. What do you think? Silver buckles on shoes sure look goofy. True. George chopped down his father's cherry tree. False. This fable was invented by Mason Parson Weems. Pretty funny, considering he made up ye old tale to teach kids a lesson in honesty. The phrase ye old gets awfully old after a while. True. When he grew up, George had wooden teeth. False. His fake teeth were made of lots of things like hippopotamus teeth, gold, lead, and other human teeth. Oh, ew. George was the only president to serve his full term in New York, not in the White House. True. Gets to stay away from those cherry trees. George was the only president to serve in New York, not in the White House, because New York has fewer trees for him to level. False. We cannot tell a lie. The real reason was because the White House wasn't completed until the second president's term. Who do you think the second president's name is? All of Ben's sayings in this book were actual Ben sayings. True. They are all from his Poor Richard's Almanac. Besides inventing clever sayings, Ben also invented bifocals, the Franklin stove, the lightning rod, and PlayStation 76. True, except for that last part. Work a turkey in there, and I think you've got something. Instead of an eagle, Ben thought America's national symbol should be a turkey. True. Can you imagine if our American symbol was a turkey? Dullard is a funny word. True. Tom's teacher was named Mr. Douglas. Also true. Tom's hobbies were architecture and botany. True. The house he eventually designed for himself, Monticello, is a Roman neoclassical masterpiece. Surrounding it are spectacular fruit, flower, and vegetable gardens. Every kid should enjoy life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. True, as long as your teacher says it's okay. The end. So John, Paul, George, Ben, and Tom were all kids with their own unique personalities, and even though they didn't do everything perfect, they had a way of using their talents for something good. And they each played their part in establishing the United States of America. So I want to wish you all a very happy 4th of July. I hope you enjoy the fireworks and all the food. I hope you stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time. Bye!